They called him crazy, a single man daring to adopt two abandoned boys. The whispers, the laughter, the judgment, it never stopped. But what they didn't know was that this man was about to prove them all wrong. And years later, when the truth came out, those who mocked him were left in complete shock. Nathan Scott had never considered himself a hero. At 42, he lived a simple life, working as a mechanic in a small town in Texas. He had no wife, no children, just an old house that felt emptier with every passing year. But all of that changed the day he saw them. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. Nathan had stopped by a local diner for a quick meal after work when he overheard two social workers discussing the case of two young brothers, Elijah, 7, and Isaiah, 5. They had been abandoned, left alone in a small apartment for days before the authorities found them. Their mother had disappeared, and their father was nowhere to be found. Nathan didn't know why, but something inside him tightened. "They're going to be split up," one of the women sighed, stirring her coffee. "No one wants to adopt two kids together, especially not boys that age." Her words struck him like a punch to the gut. Separated? These kids had already lost everything. Now they were going to lose each other too? He couldn't shake the thought. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, an idea formed in his mind. A ridiculous, impossible idea. Could he do it? Could he really give them a home? Nathan had never raised a child before. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a perfect man. But as he thought about those two little boys scared and alone in the system, he realized something. Maybe he didn't need to be perfect. Maybe he just needed to be there. Nathan woke up the next morning with one thought running through his mind. Was he really going to do this? Doubt crept in. He had no experience with kids, no idea how to be a father. But the image of Elijah and Isaiah, two little boys on the verge of being separated forever, wouldn't leave him. He grabbed his jacket, took a deep breath, and drove straight to the Texas Department of Child Services. When he walked into the office, the receptionist barely looked up. "Sir, how can I help you?" Nathan hesitated for a moment before saying the words out loud. "I want to adopt." The woman finally lifted her eyes, scanning him from head to toe. A single man, dressed in worn-out jeans and a work jacket covered in grease stains. She didn't even try to hide her skepticism. "Are you married?" she asked, typing on her computer. "No." "Do you have any children?" "No." She sighed and gestured for him to take a seat. "Wait here. Someone will speak with you." Nathan waited for nearly an hour before a caseworker, Linda Carter, finally called his name. She was in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a firm but polite tone. "Mr. Scott, what exactly brings you here today?" Nathan cleared his throat. "I heard about Elijah and Isaiah. I don't want them to be separated. I want to adopt them both." Linda blinked, clearly surprised. "You want to adopt two boys? As a single man?" "Yes." She sighed and folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Scott, I won't sugarcoat this. Single men adopting, especially two children at once, is almost unheard of. You'll have to go through an intense screening process, background checks, financial stability, psychological evaluations. It's a long road." Nathan nodded. "I understand." "And even if you pass all of that," she continued, "the court will likely challenge your ability to provide a stable home." Nathan could feel it already. The judgment, the doubt. They didn't believe he could do this. But he wasn't backing down. "Tell me what I have to do." Linda sighed again, but handed him a thick stack of paperwork. "Start with this, and be prepared. It's not going to be easy." Nathan took the papers and left the office. He had just stepped into a fight he wasn't sure he could win. The next few weeks were brutal. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories that reveal hard truths and unexpected turns, don't forget to subscribe for more. Nathan had to attend mandatory parenting classes. Sitting in a room filled with married couples who whispered about him behind his back, he had to undergo a home inspection where a social worker looked at every corner of his house, taking notes like she was searching for reasons to deny him. He had to answer deeply personal questions in psychological evaluations: his childhood, his views on discipline, his ability to provide emotional support. And everywhere he went, the same unspoken question lingered. Why would a single man want to adopt 2 black boys? Some people didn't bother hiding their suspicions. "What's the real reason you want these kids?" a social worker asked bluntly. Nathan clenched his jaw. "Because no one else will." They didn't expect that answer. Still, the roadblocks kept coming. Nathan's co-workers at the auto shop laughed when they heard about his plan. "Man, you barely take care of yourself. How are you going to raise 2 kids?" one of them joked. His own sister called him concerned. "Nathan, this is crazy. You don't even know them. What if they have issues? What if you regret it?" Nathan had no response, because deep down he was scared too. Was he making a mistake? Would he really be enough for those kids? But every time doubt tried to take over, he reminded himself of one thing. He wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. Then came the hardest part, meeting Elijah and Isaiah for the first time. The day arrived faster than he expected. He was led into a small, quiet room at the Child Services Center. His hands were sweaty, his heart pounding. The door opened, and there they were. 2 small boys sitting close together, their tiny hands gripping each other's shirts. Wide eyes filled with fear, confusion, and hope. Nathan swallowed hard. They were so small, so fragile. Isaiah, the younger one, hid partially behind his brother. Elijah, the oldest, sat stiffly, watching Nathan with careful eyes. Nathan took a deep breath, then crouched to their level. "Hey guys, I'm Nathan." Neither boy responded. "I heard you like cars," Nathan tried again. "I work on them all day. Maybe one day I can show you how to fix one." Isaiah peeked out a little. "Really?" Nathan smiled. "Really?" Elijah still didn't speak. His eyes stayed locked on Nathan, searching, trying to figure out if he was just another adult who would disappear. Nathan knew he had to prove himself, and he would, no matter how long it took. That day, as he walked out of the center, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just fighting to adopt them anymore. He was fighting to be their father. Nathan sat outside the courthouse, gripping his hands together as he tried to steady his nerves. The fight to adopt Elijah and Isaiah had been exhausting, but today was the biggest battle of all, convincing a judge that he was the right father for them. His lawyer, Susan Reynolds, sat beside him, flipping through a thick file of documents. "You're as ready as you'll ever be, Nathan. Just be honest. Show them why you're doing this." Easier said than done. Nathan had spent the last 6 months jumping through every legal hoop possible. He had passed the home inspections, the financial reviews, the parenting classes, but none of that mattered if the judge wasn't convinced. Inside the courtroom, Nathan took his seat at the front while the caseworkers, the state's attorney, and the boys' temporary foster parents sat on the other side. Elijah and Isaiah were not present. Too young to sit through a trial that decided their future. The judge, Miriam Calloway, adjusted her glasses and flipped through his file. Nathan could already feel the weight of her skepticism. "Mr. Scott, you're a single man. You work full-time as a mechanic. You have no prior parenting experience. Why do you believe you are the best person to take care of these boys?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing." A flicker of interest crossed the judge's face. "I grew up in foster care," he continued, "bounced from home to home. Every time I started to feel safe, I was moved somewhere new. I know what that does to a child. I know what it feels like to be unwanted." The room was silent. Elijah and Isaiah have already lost so much: their parents, their home. And now people are saying they should lose each other too. I won't let that happen. The state's attorney leaned forward. "Mr. Scott, do you understand the magnitude of this commitment? These boys will need emotional support, financial security, stability. Can you provide that?" Nathan straightened. "I can. I might not be rich, and I might not have a wife, but I have a home, a safe one, and I have more love for those boys than anyone else in this room. They don't need perfect. They just need someone who won't leave." Judge Calloway sighed, tapping her pen against the file. "There are concerns." Nathan's stomach twisted. There is hesitation about placing two black boys in the care of a white single man. Do you understand the cultural challenges that come with that? Nathan expected this question, but it still stung. "I know I can't give them the same experience as if they were raised by a black family," he admitted. "But what I can do is make sure they grow up knowing who they are, knowing their history, their culture, their worth, and I will fight to give them everything they need to feel proud of where they come from." The judge studied him for a long moment before nodding. The state pushed back, questioning his long work hours, his lack of a support system, and whether two growing boys could thrive under his care. Nathan had answers for everything. And yet, when the judge finally announced she would take the case under further review, his stomach dropped. No decision, no guarantees, just more waiting. Nathan left the courtroom exhausted. He had fought with everything he had. But was it enough? That night, he drove home, staring at the two empty beds in the room he had prepared for Elijah and Isaiah. He had imagined them here. He had pictured them laughing, playing, running down the hallway, calling him Dad. Now it all felt like a distant dream. He sat on the edge of one of the beds, rubbing his hands over his face. For the first time, doubt consumed him. What if the judge said no? What if he had done all of this for nothing? And then his phone buzzed. A message from Susan. "Decision will be finalized next week. Prepare for anything." Nathan took a deep breath. One more week. One more battle. He wasn't giving up now. Nathan barely slept that week. Every time he closed his eyes, all he could hear was the judge's voice. There are concerns. It didn't matter that he had passed every requirement. It didn't matter that he had built a home for Elijah and Isaiah. The court still saw him as a risk. He wasn't married. He wasn't rich. He wasn't what they expected. But he was all those boys had. On the morning of the final hearing, Nathan sat in his truck outside the courthouse, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded. What if the answer was no? Susan arrived and knocked on his window. "Come on, it's time." Nathan exhaled sharply and stepped out. This was it. Inside, the courtroom was tense. The judge sat at her bench, flipping through papers. The caseworkers were there, whispering among themselves. Nathan wasn't allowed to see Elijah and Isaiah yet, not until a final decision was made. His hands were sweaty. Judge Calloway cleared her throat and looked him directly in the eyes. "Mr. Scott, I have reviewed all the details of your case. I have spoken with social workers, case managers, and professionals regarding what is best for these boys. I have taken into consideration the concerns that were raised." Nathan swallowed hard. She sighed. "And despite my initial reservations, I have reached a conclusion." The room fell dead silent. Nathan felt his entire world hang on the next words. "I hereby approve the adoption of Elijah and Isaiah Scott." Time stopped. Nathan blinked, his breath catching in his throat. Had he heard that right? Susan nudged him, whispering, "Nathan, you won." He exhaled shakily. He won. The judge continued, "Mr. Scott, I do not make this decision lightly. These boys have suffered tremendous loss. What they need now is stability and love. You have demonstrated your commitment to providing both." Nathan barely heard the rest. The words, "approved adoption," kept repeating in his head. He turned to Susan, still in disbelief. "I did it?" She grinned. "You did it." The judge signed the final documents. It was official. Elijah and Isaiah were his sons. The first day as a father. Nathan arrived at the Child Services Center just hours later. His hands shook as he walked in. The social worker led him down the hallway. "They're waiting for you." He stepped into the room, and there they were. Elijah and Isaiah sat on a couch, small backpacks beside them. They looked up, unsure, hesitant. Nathan crouched to their level. "Hey, guys." Neither spoke. "So, I got some news." He took a deep breath. "If you want, you can come home with me today. Forever." Elijah's eyes widened. Isaiah gasped. "Forever?" Isaiah whispered. Nathan nodded. "Forever." Elijah's lip trembled. He grabbed his little brother's hand, then looked at Nathan. "You promise?" Nathan swallowed past the lump in his throat. "I swear." For a moment the room was still. Then Isaiah launched himself forward, wrapping his tiny arms around Nathan's neck. Elijah followed, burying his face in Nathan's shoulder. Nathan closed his eyes, holding them both. For the first time, they weren't just two kids in a system. They were home, his sons. Years passed, but Nathan never forgot the moment he held Elijah and Isaiah in his arms for the first time. The road ahead wasn't easy. There were challenges, big ones. The boys had nightmares. They struggled in school at first. They feared Nathan would leave them, just like everyone else had. But he didn't. Through every tear, every difficult night, every moment of doubt, Nathan stayed. He learned how to do their hair properly after a few failed attempts and lots of laughter. He found a community that helped him understand their culture, making sure they never felt like they had to be anything but themselves. And most importantly, he showed them every single day that they were loved. Years later, they prove everyone wrong. 15 years had passed. The same town that once whispered behind Nathan's back now spoke about something else entirely. Because today, Elijah and Isaiah weren't just two kids who had been adopted by a single father. Today, they were walking across a graduation stage. Nathan sat in the crowd, his heart pounding as the announcer called, "Valedictorian Elijah Scott." The audience erupted in applause as Elijah stepped onto the stage, standing tall, confident. Nathan wiped his eyes, overcome with emotion. He still remembered the scared little boy who barely spoke when they first met. Now Elijah was about to give a speech to hundreds of people. Elijah took the microphone, scanning the crowd. Then his eyes found Nathan. "When I was 5 years old, I lost everything. My family, my home, my sense of safety. The audience fell silent. For a long time, I believed that no one would ever fight for me, that I would always be just another kid in the system. Nathan clenched his jaw, his hands shaking. But then someone did fight for me, even when everyone told him he couldn't, even when the court doubted him, even when society questioned him. Elijah's voice grew thick with emotion. Nathan Scott, my father, gave me and my brother a home, a future, a life. Nathan sucked in a breath. Elijah smiled, eyes shining. They said he couldn't do it. They said he would fail. But look at us now. The crowd erupted in cheers. Nathan couldn't hold back the tears as Elijah held up his diploma, then pointed straight at him. Isaiah, standing beside his brother in his own graduation gown, did the same. This was their answer to everyone who had doubted them. Nathan had spent years proving he was enough, but today his sons had done it for him. A father's pride. After the ceremony, Nathan stood near his truck, still in disbelief. Then Elijah and Isaiah ran up to him, throwing their arms around him. "We did it, Dad," Isaiah grinned. Nathan let out a breathless laugh. "Number you did it." Elijah shook his head. "Number we did it together." Nathan pulled them both into a tight embrace. This was the moment he had fought for, the moment that made every struggle worth it. The whispers, the doubt, the judgment, they meant nothing now, because love had won, and it always would. Before you go, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about Michael's journey and Megan's courage? If you want to hear more stories that reveal hard truths and powerful transformations, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching and for supporting stories that matter.